Hello, this is Dr. Jordan Cooper, Executive Director of Just and Sinner. And I am here with a really exciting announcement about a new publication that is a project from Just and Sinner that has been in the works for a little while now. We're really excited to be able to share this with you. And I am the editor in chief of this new publication, but I also have with me the managing editor, Dr. Nathan Greeley. And some of you may know him. He's been on my podcast before on the Just and Sinner podcast, but he is also the fellow of apologetics and philosophical theology with the Widener Institute. He has hosted a number of seminars with us, and he's also the author of a book called Christian Apologetics, a Lutheran Introduction. So welcome, Dr. Greeley.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, and I know you've been putting a lot of work into this. So let's just talk about what this publication is. I haven't actually said the name of it yet. So the title of this is The Conservative Reformer. This is a periodical that Just and Sinner is launching. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about exactly what the Conservative Reformer is, what our publications are going to look like, where you can find the things that we produce.
Well, it's an online publication, and it's going to be putting out short articles, reviews, poetry, other hymns, and so forth. And that'll be coming out once a week. So every week we will be putting out a new piece of writing. And the writing will deal with topics that we think are quite important, things like theology, philosophy, history, the arts, education, contemporary events. So just things that we think matter and need to be discussed in a public forum like this. So we will be giving our readers the opportunity to hear what we believe are informed opinions about these matters. And we hope that that will help to form them and cultivate a greater sense on their part of what's at stake in some of these discussions.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about then the motto of the Conservative Reformer. So our motto is Classical Lutheranism for the Contemporary World. And that really explains, I think, really what Just and Sinner is trying to do as a whole, as an organization. But that's what we're trying to do with this publication in this new written format. So let's talk a little bit about that motto. So the first question is, what do we mean by classical Lutheranism?
Right. It's a good question. So classical Lutheranism, from my point of view, is primarily the Lutheranism that we see in the 16th and 17th centuries. So the Lutheranism of the Reformers and the Lutheranism of the Orthodox theologians that came after them. And I think it's important that we hearken back to those figures, or we pay attention to those figures, particularly the Orthodox theologians of the 17th century, because I think they represent a kind of a high watermark or a high point in the history of Lutheranism. These were theologians that were extremely learned. They had many gifts. They were masters not only of theology, but they were masters of the liberal arts. They were masters of philosophy. They were engaged with the philosophical and the scientific thinking of the time. They were engaged with what was going on in other traditions like Roman Catholicism and the Reformed traditions. So I think that they have a lot to teach us about how to think well about many things, how to do theology well, how to think about philosophy well, how to think about the role of arts and liturgy in the church. There's just a great number of things that we can learn from them. And so I think that when we talk about classical Lutheranism, we're really talking about these figures and the kind of the methods they had, the agenda, the goals, the habits, just all of the different things that made up their or constituted their approach to Christianity and to theology. And so we want to learn as much from them as we can. We want to bring that forward. We want to apply it to today. We're not seeking to go back in time. We're not seeking to simply revisit the past. That's not really the interest here. But we do want to mine or to see what we can glean from these figures and bring forward to our contemporary context. So it's not some hidebound retrieval that we're trying to perform where we just, we ignore our contemporary context and we're oblivious to the kinds of things happening today, the kinds of currents of thought and opinion that we find in the church and outside the church today, we realize that, that kind of thing is impossible. We can't just go back and relive the past. But what we can do is we can find perhaps a better way of doing some things and a better way of thinking about some things, and we can bring that forward and we can apply that to our contemporary situation. And I think that if we look at the history of Lutheranism, it was never stronger than it was during the 17th century. That, for me, is definitely a high point in the history of that tradition. So if we want to have a robust and resilient Lutheranism today, I think that we would do well to learn as much as we can from the theologians of that period, and the reformers too, of course. But I think in many ways the Orthodox theologians built on what the reformers did and even improved upon what they did in some ways. So I think that they represent kind of the zenith of the Lutheran tradition. And so I would like to go back to those figures and just gather as much insight and as much wisdom as we possibly can, and like I said, bring that forward to today.
Yeah, and here's a question maybe more oriented toward those who may be reading or interested in reading some of the things that we're putting out, but maybe are not from the Lutheran tradition themselves, who, are maybe interested in just these kinds of broader questions about issues that are happening culturally right now and trying to find maybe philosophical foundations within the Western tradition as those have been challenged and as we're facing kind of unique challenges today in the West. There are a lot of Orthodox, and by Orthodox, I mean Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic sources that are answering these kinds of questions. So for the person who's maybe just looking for answers or looking into these maybe big questions that we are seeking to answer, what is it that's unique about Lutheranism? Why in particular is it that Lutheranism has something to say about the contemporary world?
Okay. Well, that's a great question. I think it's obvious that the contemporary world needs Christianity, right? But the problem with a lot of contemporary forms of Christianity is that they're lacking important things. There are important things that are missing from what they're bringing to the table. So we might say that they're not completely biblical or they're not fully orthodox. We can also say maybe they lack a strong sense of confessional identity, right? Like Anglicanism. I love Anglicanism in a lot of ways. There's a lot of great stuff there, but there's a real lack of a strong confessional identity in Anglicanism. And I think that's a real problem for that tradition. And, other churches, they don't value learning. They might not value history. They might not value beauty. They might not value tradition. So there's a lot of things, liturgy. There's a lot of things that other forms of Christianity, I feel like, are missing. And because of that, I feel like they don't have the robust, the resilient, the faithful expression of Christianity that you can find in Lutheranism, and in particular in classical Lutheranism, this Lutheranism that I was just talking about, that we find in its most significant form in the 17th century. So that's what I want to invite people to appreciate. I want to invite people to understand that there is more out there perhaps than what they're familiar with, or what they've grown up with, or what they've experienced in their own churches and congregations. I want them to understand that Lutheranism has this tremendously compelling approach to a great number of issues and a great number of topics, and we have a very full and robust picture and vision of what Christianity is and what the Christian life is all about. And so I think that people who are not familiar with Lutheranism, or perhaps are not familiar with, evangelical Catholic Christianity, with, deeply historical Christianity, we can show them something that they've been missing. And I think that that's one of the missions of this periodical, is to present to the world a vision for what Lutheranism is at its best, and to show that that form of Christianity has more to offer than any other out there.
Fantastic. Now, finally, I have to ask, how is it that people can support the mission of the conservative reformer if they're really interested in what we're doing and they want to support this work as it continues?
Well, first of all, of course, we would like them to read our articles. We'd like them to share our articles if they find them interesting or if they find them helpful. And if people want to write for us, we would also welcome submissions from people. They can get in contact with you or with me, and we will send them a FAQ that will explain to them our expectations and the things that they'll have to do to format their writing and so forth. So we're just interested in getting a lot of people who share our sensibilities, share our concerns, share our values. We're interested in getting those people to participate with us and collaborate with us. So we would like really as many people as possible who are confessional Lutherans and want to see this theology and this vision promoted and promulgated and publicized, to contribute and to help us by submitting articles. And we're like I said, we're open to publishing on a wide range of topics. It doesn't have to be something that's narrowly theological. It can also deal with history or philosophy or politics or education, just something that's in some way pertinent to what we feel is the vision of classical Lutheranism, as like I said, we see in the Reformers and in the Orthodox theologians.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this, Dr. Greeley, and sharing information about this really exciting new project.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We will include a link to the website down below for the Conservative Reformer, where you can find our articles. And the launch date is April 15th. So you won't be able to access it until then, but that's when our first article comes out to introduce you to the Conservative Reformer. So we'll make sure that if you have signed up for the Justin Sinner newsletter, that you will get an email when that article is published, as well as when new articles are published. So if you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can go to justinsinner.org, and on the homepage there, you can sign up for the newsletter. And make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. God bless.